Hello, this is Mona Eltahawy, and as always, fuck the patriarchy. Welcome to my reading from Headscarves and Hymens, Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution, my first book published in 2015. I'm starting with the dedication. To the girls of the Middle East and North Africa, be immodest, rebel, disobey, and know you deserve to be free. The epigraph from Gloria Anzaldua's Speaking in Tongues, a letter to third world women writers. Write with your eyes like painters, with your ears like musicians, with your feet like dancers. You are the truth sayer with quill and torch. Write with your tongues of fire. Don't let the pen banish you from yourself. Don't let the ink coagulate in your pens. Don't let the censor snuff out the spark, nor the gags muffle your voice. Put your shit on paper. We are not reconciled to the oppressors who wet their howl on our grief. We are not reconciled. Why they hate us. In Distant View of a Minaret, the late and much neglected Egyptian writer Alifa Rifaat begins her short story with a woman so unmoved during sex with her husband that as he focuses solely on his pleasure, she notices a spider web she must sweep off the ceiling and has time to ruminate on her husband's repeated refusal to prolong intercourse until she climaxes, as though purposely to deprive her. Just before her husband reaches orgasm, the call to prayer interrupts their intercourse and he rolls over. After washing up, she loses herself in prayer and looks out onto the street from her balcony. She interrupts her reverie to dutifully prepare coffee for her husband to drink after his nap. Taking it to their bedroom to pour it in front of him as he prefers, she notices that he's dead. She instructs their son to go get a doctor. Rifaat writes, she returned to the living room and poured out the coffee for herself. She was surprised at how calm she was. End quote. In a crisp 3.5 pages of fiction, Rifaat lays out a trifecta of sex, death, and religion that forms the pulsating heart of misogyny in the Middle East. Here is a writer who, when she was alive, was held up by academics as an authentic Egyptian woman, untainted by a foreign language, she spoke only Arabic, and untainted by influence from abroad. It's said that Rifaat never traveled outside Egypt, although she did perform a pilgrimage to Mecca and attended a literary conference in the United Kingdom. She was forced by her family to marry a man of their choice with whom she traveled across Egypt. Rifaat does not mince words, nor does she mollify. In this slim volume of short stories titled Distant View of a Minaret, she introduces you to a sexually frustrated middle-aged wife who wonders if her mother suffered the same fate with her father, and another mother who laments her youth lost to female genital mutilation and a society that fought her womanhood at every turn. The stories show women constantly sublimating themselves in religion, even as this faith is used against them by clerics and male-dominated society. There is no sugar-coating it. We Arab women live in a culture that is fundamentally hostile to us, enforced by men's contempt. They don't hate us because of our freedoms, as the tired post-9/11 American cliche had it. We have no freedoms because they hate us. As Rifaat powerfully says, yes, they hate us, it must be said. Quote. The fact is, there's no joy for a girl in growing up. It's just one disaster after another until you end up an old woman who's good for nothing and who's real lucky to find someone to feel sorry for her, Rifaat writes in the story Bahia's Eyes. Some may ask why I'm bringing this up now when the Middle East and North Africa are in turmoil, when the whole world right now is in turmoil, when people are losing their lives by the thousands, when it can sometimes seem as though the revolutions that began in 2010 in Tunisia, incited not by the usual hatred of America and Israel, but by a common demand for freedom and dignity, have lost their way. After all, shouldn't everyone receive basic rights first before women demand specific treatment? Also, what does gender, or for that matter, sex, have to do with the Arab Spring? It should have everything to do with the revolution. This is our chance to dismantle an entire political and economic system that treats half of humanity like children at best. If not now, when? In May 2012, I published an article titled "Why Do They Hate Us?" in Foreign Policy magazine. The reaction the article generated, by turns supportive, laudatory, and outraged, made it clear that misogyny in the Arab world is an explosive issue. When I write or give lectures about gender inequality in the Middle East and North Africa, I understand I am walking into a minefield. On one side stands a bigoted and racist Western right wing that is all too eager to hear critiques of the region and of Islam that it can use again. On one side stands a bigoted and racist Western right wing that is all too eager to hear critiques of the region and of Islam that it can use against us. I would like to remind these conservatives, especially here in the United States, that no country is free of misogyny and that their efforts to reverse hard-earned women's reproductive rights here in the United States makes them brothers in hatred to our Islamists. On the other side stand those Western liberals who rightly condemn imperialism and yet are blind to the cultural imperialism they are performing when they silence critiques of misogyny. They behave as if they want to save my culture and my faith from me, and forget that they are immune to the violations about which I speak. Blind to the privilege and the paternalism that drive them, they give themselves the right to determine what is authentic to my culture and my faith. If the right wing is driven by a covert racism, the left sometimes suffers from an implicit racism through which it usurps my right to determine what I can and cannot say. One of the criticisms of my essay was that it was written in English. No one ever brings that up as a criticism with regard to articles that expose human rights violations or the failing economies in our region. The double standard is clear. When it comes to women's issues, keep it between us, in a language only we can understand, so that you don't make us look bad. Implicit in the criticism of my essay was the charge that I want the West to rescue us. Only we can rescue ourselves. I have never implored anyone else to rescue us from misogyny. It is our fight to win. I implore allies of the countries in this part of the world, the Middle East and North Africa, to pay more attention to women's rights and to refuse to allow cultural relativism to justify horrendous violations of women's rights. This is very different from calling on anyone to rescue us. While I'm acutely aware of Islamophobes and xenophobic political right-wingers who are all too glad to hear how badly Muslim men treat their women, I'm also acutely aware that there's a right wing among Muslim men that does propagate misogyny. We must confront both both, not ally ourselves with one in order to fight the other. One of the most effective ways to do this is to listen to the voices of women from within the culture who are trying to dismantle misogyny. The women featured throughout these chapters, whose voices are part of the revolution and are essential to ensuring its success, are from within the culture and they must be heard. The women fighting for the double revolution against the state and the street and the home that we need are the direct descendants of our feminist foremothers. Feminist foremothers such as Hostility and Durraya Shafiq and the countless others whose names we might not know, but whose struggles to liberate us from a host of misogynies we continue to honor. We stand on their shoulders, these women's shoulders, and we must fortify our own shoulders for those to come. I am angry for all of the hundreds of thousands of other women who continue to be violated in ways much worse than I was, and who yet have no platform for sharing their experience. I want to move beyond my privilege to remember the millions of women who have none or very little. I know nothing frightens Islamists and the equally misogynistic secular men of our societies more than the demand for women's rights and sexual freedoms. And that is ultimately what our double revolution must achieve. Why do these men hate us? Why do they hate us? They hate us because they need us. They fear us. They understand how much control it takes to keep us in line, to keep us good girls with our hymens intact until it's time for them to fuck us into mothers who raise future generations of misogynists to forever fuel their patriarchy. One more time, why do they hate us? They hate us because they need us. They fear us. They understand how much control it takes to keep us in line, to keep us good girls with our hymens intact until it's time for them to fuck us into mothers who raise future generations of misogynists to forever fuel their patriarchy. They hate us because we are at once their temptation and their salvation from that patriarchy, which they must sooner or later realize hurts them too. They hate us because they know that once we rid ourselves of the alliance of state and street that works in tandem to control us, we will demand a reckoning. We will demand a reckoning. The battles over women's bodies can be won only by a revolution of the mind. A revolution of the mind. Too often women are scolded for daring to bring up identity politics and are urged to lay aside women's rights for the larger goal of solidarity or fidelity to the revolution. This is a mistake. Huge swaths of the Arab world and now the entire world are being remade with far-reaching and unguessed at repercussions. And women and men both have an unprecedented opportunity to confront and root out the systemic hatred of women that reduces us to little more than our headscarves and our hymens. We might have removed Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, Zain al-Abidin Ben Ali in Tunisia, Muammar al-Qaddafi in Libya, and Ali Abdullah Saleh in Yemen. But until the rage shifts from the oppressors in our presidential palaces to the oppressors on our streets and in our homes, unless we topple the Mubaraks in our mind, in our bedrooms, and on our street corners, our revolution has not even begun. Thank you. See you at the next reading.